Whoa, there we go. Okay, we are live. All right, folks, what you are witnessing is a technical problem that we have solved. So I apologize, everybody. There we are. Yes. All right, and we are off and running. Let me just double check with Pete. Um, Sorry about that, everybody. We had a minor problem. It looks like we have straightened it out, but boy, everything was fine. And then all of a sudden, we had, oh, good. Okay. And we're going to begin. Now, I need to, everybody bear with me right now. 108, 108. I apologize. We had a minor technical glitch, which normally doesn't happen. Let me just work through it. And I'm imagining that our link did not go through. So, folks, right now, there's nothing wrong with your radio. It's 109 or your device. That was odd. You know, there's different things that can happen. This one I did not see coming, only because we haven't had any problem. It could have been little Chip, who was Kate's cat, who was jumping and may have interfered with the Wi-Fi. But I'm not ready to blame him just yet. But we're getting close. So I want to we're going to right now on this very chilly, as a matter of fact, very chilly Monday, we're going to talk with Justin Katz in our segment Politics This Week, and we'll bring you up to speed on all of the news, as a matter of fact. And I want to just make sure, again, I want to thank Pete and appreciate everybody's patience. That was very unusual, where all of a sudden, as I went to begin our program right on time, out of nowhere, and then suddenly, but I'm going to move on with it. Yes. Justin, are we on today? Yes, we are. We're live right now. And I'm not sure. I'm having a minor problem with, but everybody stay with me. Let me roll into that this portion of the program is brought to you by PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center, 3688 Quaker Lane in North Kingstown. It's PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center. They have everything available, ready, yes. Everything you need for Christmas is at PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center. So, folks, again, all right, we should be good. Justin should be joining us. I apologize, folks. We were more than ready to roll. Let me get on track here at 111. Justin is going to join us in our segment Politics This Week. And I also want to react to the discussion that was going on WPRI Channel 12 Newsmakers. I played some of that. But let me just remind you about PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center, 3688 Quaker Lane in North Kingstown. They've had a tremendous season. Fraser fir trees, potted live trees, custom handmade wreaths, custom made 10 inch, 60 inches in size. They have Christmas swag and mistletoe and hanging baskets and cut greens, decorative pots, cemetery baskets, very popular, Christmas crafts. Gift certificates are available. They're open 7 days a week. Stop it and see them. It's PR Landscape Materials and Garden Center. So now also, don't forget about the Coesit Inn, proud sponsors of our website, depetro.com. Now, those that are watching, excuse me, we are live on AM 1380 and 99.9 FM, but we're also live on our Facebook page, on X, on YouTube, and depetro.com, which is brought to you by the Coesit Inn, 226 Coesit Avenue, West Warwick. Remember what we say, lunch, dinner, drinks, and lounge. You know, the Coesit Inn, they can handle a large group. So maybe you're just planning, maybe you haven't planned as of yet, of what you're going to do as far as a Christmas party, or maybe you're a little late in the game regarding a Christmas party gathering, maybe sometimes spontaneous. Stop in at the the Coesit Inn, 226 Coesit Avenue, West Warwick. And we're having a minor problem with Okay, stand by with Justin. I'm not exactly sure. You know, isn't this amazing, folks, how I keep my composure as all hell behind the scenes is breaking loose, and yet you'd never know it because I am able to execute our broadcast in this manner. So I want to just double check, and I have no idea why, but stand by the Coesit. Now they also have the coffee Coesit, and that is brand new, right in the front of the restaurant where you can. It's now coffee at Coesit, the Coesit Inn, 226 Coesit Avenue in West Warwick. All right, stand by. Let me just tell Justin. Hold on. I don't know what is going. What exactly is wrong with that, folks? Again, I also had a very enjoyable weekend. Subscribers will get to see some of the photos after the show where we I mean, it was really spectacular. And I also want to mention, so we had the opportunity for a family gathering at the White House, and it was quite a weekend in our nation's capital in DC. And on top of that, I recognize that we live in somewhat polarizing times. However, that said, listen, it's still the White House, and it is still really remarkable and incredible. And the First Lady, I believe, leads the charge with the whole thing. And the White House at Christmas time, it's just so beautiful, and it is in fact, um, everything is Christmas. It's not, it's none of this happy holidays or anything remotely close to that. It's all about Christmas, and so I will have, and I apologize, folks, and I want to apologize to Justin. I have no idea. I have a link, and I am gonna send it. Thank you very much, Brenda. Let me and again, folks, we will get to politics this week. It's not your imagination that we are having a minor technical difficulty and I'm puzzled, admittedly, why I'm having a little bit of an issue trying to get our link to Justin Katz, because I really want to talk to him about Channel 12 newsmakers and the fact I don't understand exactly with everything that they were talking about. Oh, I see the problem. Okay. On that panel, I really don't understand why with the panel I just have such a different opinion of how this race for governor should shake out. And what I mean by that is, to me, they look at it very, very differently with a lot of the things that I think should be considered issues with this race. And I'm talking about, obviously, the race for governor. And for instance, they don't mention anything about the fact that right now the state of Rhode Island is being sued regarding, here we go, with the mail ballot situation. So there's nothing about that. And as far as how the Trump administration wants to get access to what I really want to say was the voter rolls. Also, when I'm talking about, now those of you that listen to the radio, Justin should be able to join us. So it's Tim White and Ted Nesi and their pollster Joe Fleming, and also Kara Cromwell, who I believe ran the John Laughlin campaign back when he ran in 2010. But my point is, there's no mention of, gee, why would Rhode Island Governor Dan McKee think that, that he could win the race? Nothing like, so, all right. Joining us, and I appreciate his patience with this. Justin, I apologize, but is the managing editor of anchorrising.com. and our segment is Politics This Week, and it is Justin Katz. And Justin, I want to start off with obviously some of the news uh, of the week, but what I want to touch on and just get your thought on is this business of how Rhode Island right now is being sued by the Trump administration regarding the voter rolls.
Well, from the beginning, I've thought it was silly for our Secretary of State, Greg Moore, to withhold them. Just seems like a get Trump. Everybody, the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, everybody's looking for that opportunity to be the one to stand up to the Trump administration and gain the kudos of progressives and Democrats in Rhode Island. So there's going to be a lawsuit over it, and we'll see where it goes. I mean, I'm certainly going to be paying close attention to what the Trump administration has found. Although I'd caution it, it does look suspicious to be withholding these things. It looked suspicious when the prior Secretary of State stopped giving out birthday information for registered voters. But I've been watching this long enough to know that the Democrats have such a strong hold, and they're corrupt in so many ways that are so embedded that you can explain their success around here without fraud. So people should be prepared that there might not be anything that's so obviously criminal behind it all, but it's definitely going to be one to watch.
You know, I'm also just surprised, Justin, at the way it's covered. Meaning, I don't hear about, as a result of this, there's going to be an investigative effort on behalf of the local media, or we haven't seen Secretary of State Greg Moore getting ambushed coming out of the State House and, you know, the cameras on him. Why are you withholding it? I mean, to me, it's fairly obvious. There's something going on. The fact that they say it's to protect voter information, personal information. You and I, we both know that's not true. They know it's not true. Nellie Gorbea withheld the birthday, saying it was so people's identity wouldn't be stolen. What I don't think, and I think is missing from the coverage, is they don't talk enough about the states that are providing the information, or how things are done differently in other states. So not only do I notice, Joe Powers did speak out, and there are some people speaking out, but I also find it disturbing the lack of curiosity from the media.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a big issue. I mean, if you, in any journalism story, you've got the federal administration with a lawsuit against the Secretary of State trying to get information. They treat it, when you read news stories in this area related to elections and voter rolls, there's always this insinuation. I can't bring it to mind right now, but within the past few weeks, I caught one in a local news story, in the rare occurrences of voter fraud. That's always the spin. It's unproven. It's rare. It doesn't really happen. That's not the way to cover this. There are reasons. What you do when you've got two parties, the federal government suing the state government, is the journalist should be going out there and saying, what is the federal government actually concerned about? What are the stories that they cite? What's happening there? You know, there's instances in Connecticut that became viral videos of ballots harvesting and stuffing ballot boxes with ballots. All of these things, they could be digging into things like I've done on Anchor Rising, showing local candidates in Providence who get many times their votes through mail ballots, people who had no chance of becoming, say, the mayor, getting much closer than they should have because they're ballot harvesting. You don't get stories on those. That's what ought to be the story behind this. Instead, Greg Moore gets his headline, his image of standing up to the Trump administration, because that's as far as the journalists can see in these stories. It's always good Democrats versus bad Republicans, and it's one of the many ways we're poorly served by them.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you regarding the local media as well, Justin, because I don't know if you had a chance, and I didn't send it to you, but I've been playing the audio on the radio show of newsmakers over the weekend, and they lay out the whole race, and it's, to me, it's almost like watching a political show from 20 years ago. They talk about, polling, and they got to get the ads out there, and you and it was that woman. You remember who it was? It was in the special election And she had Miguel Sanchez, I think, working on or part of the campaign, maybe even running her mail ballot operation. And it obviously didn't make sense that I think she came in second or third in mail ballots, but then came in fifth for that congressional, primary. And to me and you, I mean, it's so obvious that they were clearly doing something as if her voters would only prefer to hand their ballots over to the campaigns. So my point is, as they're going through, I noticed the discussion of it's almost still like a mystery to them of, Dan McKee still running and he still thinks he can win. It's over. At no point do they even discuss the fact that it's not rational that he would be running unless he has a plan to manipulate the campaign ballots, much like he did in 2022 when he beat Helena Foulkes in that primary.
Right, and I'm blanking on the legislator's name, but my point when I traced that case where the state legislator was running for Congress and got a huge amount of the vote was there was no, you would think journalists would say, this is strange. This woman
right.
is like third in the race. I haven't seen a single sign. It's not like there's been this huge outpouring of support for her except through these mail ballots. And it really was striking. And I'm getting kind of bored of their commentary too. They are. I think you put it perfectly. It's like they're stuck in a storyline they learned in journalism school 20 years ago. They can't get past it. I mean, there are articles about how Gukian's going to have a hard time in his race for governor because independents are moving away from Donald Trump. I've seen no evidence of that. He improved. There's been a huge swing in independents. He improved among them in the last election. There's no reason. And if you look in Providence, the mayoral race, there was Axel Brito I wrote about this on Anchor Rising as well. He was basically a radical Democrat who supported the Second Amendment. That was like his Republican claim. He got 4% of the vote, 27 voters. And I question how much worse would a very conservative Republican have done? I mean, Patricia Morgan won enough votes in the last election, in her run for Congress, Senate, that she would have almost beat the city council. Not mayor, the city council, Democratic council member who just won. Alex Brito got 4% of the vote. My point being, a conservative Republican can run and win. These are interesting stories the news media doesn't want to hear because it's just stuck. They say everybody has to move left, right? Gukian ought to move left. That's how he's going to capture those independents in Barrington, East Greenwich. That's always the story. It's been the story forever. And it will be the story even as Democrats turn into totalitarians and stomp on us all because they've got 99.9% of all elected officials in the state. It's mind-blowing to me that journalists can't see this because it hurts their material and their careers, in my view.
I wonder how much of it also, Justin, is just the fact that it's my belief that Governor McKee, well, he'll pull some votes, but they are basic to me, betting the farm that they're going to be able to manipulate the campaign ballots. I know people call them mail ballots, but as you and I have talked about, no one mails them anymore. The campaigns hand them out, the campaigns collect them, the campaigns put them in the drop boxes. But to me, if you're the television stations, you want to convince people, oh, you have to run all these ads, because it's a money thing. Oh, you got to spend a lot of money on television. If you're a pollster, they have skin in the game. Well, you got to do a lot of polling. To me, they don't want to even confront the fact that if we're down to just people collecting these campaign ballots, and remember, and people watching and listening should understand, Rhode Island's an outlier on this. We're different than Massachusetts and Connecticut, where there's no limit how much the campaigns can collect. But to me, Justin, if people really recognize, wow, you don't have to spend money on television. You don't even have to spend money on polls. All you do is pump all the money into the ground game. So my point is, I think there's something at play there that they don't even want to hint on the fact. And on newsmakers, they didn't even mention the fact Helena Foulkes beat Governor McKee day of voting, that Alan Fung beat, even Ted Nesi said, Alan Fung came close. He just couldn't push over the finish line. That's not true. It was because Magaziner got 14,000 mail ballots compared to Fung to just 4. Now, Justin, I did want to ask you though about that Dan McGowan of the Boston Globe, his column on Aaron Gukian, and basically saying he's got a very tall order as the Republican running for governor.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, as I said, their way of thinking, and I've written about this on Anchorizing. The news media's way of thinking, I think, has it all wrong. They are pumping up Gukian as potential. They want to make him seem credible. Maybe I think you raise a good point. Maybe it's so that he'll advertise with them, so people will pay attention and think that their coverage is necessary. I don't see that as an accurate portrayal of what's really going on there. There are independents who can be won over by conservative Republicans. The Republicans need to identify a path that is different from all the Democrats in the race, and I think that's what like McGowan's analysis just completely misses. It's like they don't want to believe that it's possible for people to change their minds. They don't want to believe there could be a groundswell for somebody. I mean, in fairness, I haven't seen many people who can pull it off. I mean, one of the catchier parts of that column was when he quoted Ashley Kalis's list of 4 credible Republicans to run for governor. I'm not so sure about her list either, but it shows, she's thinking who could run and win with a different message than the Democrats have. And it's amazing to me that even seasoned political journalists like McGowan can't see past this old time left, right, got to be moderated for the independents. They can't see past that storyline. It's just bizarre to me. And I think if they want to compensate for the mail ballots taking their advertising and polling revenue away, they ought to find stories and find the controversy, find that underdog Republican and follow them and back them up and make them the face of news coverage so that there's interest in the public. But that's not the route they take. I guess they just want to seem more progressive and wise old truth sayers than that.
What do you make of, and I wanted to get your thought on Ashley Kalis quoted in that. I'll go first. I didn't like it. To me, referring to him as a Forrest Gump or that she's picking who could run a credible race, I don't think she ran a great race. I didn't think she was a great candidate. Other than she spent a lot of money and was, maybe a little bit different just because the type of operation, and she certainly put a lot of her own money in. But and then since she left, I would argue someone like Nicole Solis has had far more impact than Ashley Kalis. I didn't like it. I've heard talk that Ashley Kalis would love to run on a ticket with Joe Shekarchi at the top of the ticket for governor and her as lieutenant governor. So what does that tell you where her leanings go? But for her to say, well, it should be Ken Block, who's not running, who's already run, who couldn't get past the primary against Alan Fung. Blake Filippi has no interest. I like Blake. No interest in running. And Jessica De La Cruz, okay, state senator, northern part of the state, but she's never run statewide. And Ashley Kalis touts herself as though she would be the 4th person. I didn't like it. And to me, the media is almost paying more attention to her now that she's willing to knock her own party as opposed to when she was criticizing Governor McKee.
Well, there's some truth to why the news media would want to pay attention to that. They love when Republicans infight. I think I have a bit more credible view of Ashley Kalis's ability to run a race. She's got business savvy. She does have her own money to invest in it. She's paid a bit more attention. I think last time around she was a little premature in running. Just came to the state. And I think a lot of it is what we're seeing now is she is learning from that. Sort of like Donald Trump was in office and was rolled a bit in his first term because he didn't know how it really worked in Washington. I think there's potential for that. That said, I agree with you on her list. I mean, Ken Block, my response when people bring up Ken Block is, how many times are we going to let him foil Republican candidates for governor? He did it as a moderate. He did it as a Republican. He's caused a lot of trouble for Republicans in this state, and he enters kind of at his whim. And I agree with, Blake Filippi, Jessica De La Cruz. I like them a lot as legislators. I haven't seen them make the case, whether they're interested or not. I haven't seen them make the case that they would be good as chief executives. But but I do think she would be potentially, she would have the potential, if she held on to a conservative point of view, to be a bit more effective in breaking through that news media um, veil where they can't see anything to the right of far left as credible. I think she'd have a chance there, but I think her list was underwhelming. And part of the problem, let's admit it, is that there's just not that much in Rhode Island for Republicans to hope for.
Yeah, I still think you need, President Trump came out of the box, and the way he distinguished himself was the fact of the build the wall, and him building the wall in the campaign that was 15 into 16. That Republican primary started with 19. To me, you have to have, in order to really stand out to me, you got to have some, I don't want to say gimmick, but just something that makes sense, that kind of defines you a little bit. And you just saw it in the New York race, where Mamdani has really embraced housing, and that is obviously a huge issue in New York. So I would, in 2022, what was Ashley Kalis's big? She didn't really have an issue that we associate. As I said, I think Nicole Salas has had more effect. Justin, I want to ask you though. Also, I sent you Boston Globe, Rhode Island Senate leaders on taxing the rich, new judges, saving 2 hospitals in crisis. I think what is so striking about this is when you have the Senate president, Val Lawson, who's the president of as we know, the teachers union, and they're trying to get into law that it's a constitutional right for children to get an education. To me, this is it's a backroom deal with the House of, this is the legislation we want. What do you want? So they're horse trading up there. But what does that even mean, that the teachers union want to make in Rhode Island it's a constitutional right? If anything, I just read that as more power for the unions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This was one of those issues for a while. Gary Sass, I haven't heard from him lately, but Gary Sass, who was relatively conservative guy, used to run Rhode Island Public Expenditures Council. He was backing this constitutional right to education. All it means is that when the unions are pushing so hard, there's no more budget left, they can sue and get more budget for their union members. That's really all it means. And I think we'll see. It may be that negotiation where Valerie Lawson's saying, because she did specifically say Shekarchi opposes it, and this is one area where we disagree. We'll see if that's a trade, or it could be, there could be people in the background telling even her, look, this would be a killer in the state, but she's got to pretend to be pushing for it. That could be it also. But so we'll see where it goes. She's got to keep it alive. Every time she brings it up, people ought to remember, like you said, she's president squared, president of the Senate, president of the state teachers union, which is probably the biggest single special interest in the state, is running one branch of our legislature. That's a huge concern. And this sort of legislation, it would be a killer. It's not a right to an education. It's a right to the unions to take more tax dollars. And that's where Rhode Island's been going for a long time. But I hope Shekarchi or whoever has a reasonable head in the General Assembly can push back on it. But I thought her mention of him was interesting. If she keeps pushing from the left like that, it'll open up space for him to be something like a center-right hero, which could have implications in a gubernatorial race.
Or to me, they use that over his head if they're like a carrot in the stick. If he does want to run for governor and wants their support, to me, they're already putting out there what they expect. Many years ago, a speaker, said to me in passing, we get the budget, they get the judges, and then we just kind of go back and forth from there. Justin, one more before we get to Katz's Corner. I am curious your thought that the League of Businesses of Dave Levesque of Brood Awakenings has started. And there's this story, Rhode Island Senate roiled by prospect of primary challenges by relatives of 2 Democrat leaders. I'm curious your thought of how the local media, how they're starting to frame, because I've had David on and know him, and he's a great guy, but how they're starting to frame this League of Businesses that are trying to be nonpartisan, and they're really going to get some people elected in the Senate. Aaron Gukian did have his kickoff announcement at the Brood in Warwick, but just the way it's framed, and in that article, they're trying to say, oh, here we go with the relatives. But to me, it's the whole reason why they're objecting is it's because progressives could be taken out.
I think that's exactly it. That's that Senate roiled by the prospect of primary challenges. It kind of cracks me up. You see, they bring out the progressives, DeMario and the others saying, and Valverde saying, "Well, I haven't done anything. This is just leadership coming after me," as if your job, as if legislature, you're just supposed to be there until you screw up. Like once you're elected, it's your job to lose. That's not how it works. When the community's values change, when the situation changes, they can elect other people. That's kind of democracy. And I think that's the spin we'd be getting from the news media if it were, say, leadership going after conservative Democrats. Then it would be, oh well, this is the way democracy works. And so it's another one of those ways they twist the narrative around you. You're not owed anything. One little thing I did notice in that column was they mentioned almost in passing, almost as if it was a normal thing, that David Levesque supports and continues to support Donald Trump. I thought that was it. Just sort of, it felt like we've moved to a new period here, because a year or two ago that would have been headline. Trump supporting League of Rhode Island Business backs conservative Democrats. That to me was at least worth noting. But in general, I think they're doing a good thing. I thought it was interesting that he tells an anecdote of David Levesque of going into the speaker's office over some Second Amendment bills, and he says, "You're too late." Shikarchi says, "You're too late. You got to organize." And I wondered, is that like code for you got to get some money together and start buying people off, because they're promising tens of thousands of dollars to candidates who run. So it seemed like a little bit of a view of how it actually works in Rhode Island.
Yeah, I just find, you and I are so familiar on the inside of all of these different groups that, as we know, like Crowley has his hands in working families. And then there's all these groups and organizations that pop up, and it's seen as, oh, it's grassroots and it's a grassroots organization and treated with this and this group of businesses. It's far more of, isn't this curious? And they want gun legislation, and they seem to be Trump supporters. And there's an air of, it's curious of who these people are and what they really want. With the other side, it's always, well, this is democracy in action, and this is what democracy looks like, and this is the groundswell. And no one ever, lifts the mask off to show that, wait a minute, Crowley is part of these 5 different types of names and groups that sometimes pop up and stuff. But suddenly there's some businesses, and it's a little concerning, and that. So just your final thought on that, then we'll get to Katz's Corner.
Well, in similar vein, I've been starting to make a habit when I see articles about these activist groups saying the Trump administration is doing this to housing or SNAP or whatever. I'm starting to look up their tax forms, and they're all paid activists basically. But that's never part of the story. It's never, oh, of course they're there because between all the people at the podium, they're making $500,000 a year of indirect taxpayer dollars to advocate for this. It's never that. It's, oh, they're good-spirited people. I think you see that with the League of Rhode Island Businesses. It's possible though that they're genuinely taking journalists around here by surprise who aren't used to people putting their money behind it and starting to gain traction and actually gaining a pretty quick inroads with leadership in at least one of the chambers. And I think that might be shocking the journalists a little bit. And if they want any tips on how to cover it or what might be going on, they could call one of us, and I'm sure we'll be willing to help them out with the story.
One more note about just the way the stories are covered, and I'll go into. I didn't hear anyone mention the fact that President Trump got 45% of the vote in CD2 last November. So I think that's significant, number one. Number two, Ashley Kalus actually hurt the Fung campaign because she underperformed where Alan Fung had done in 2014 and 2018. The Fung people felt that she was a drag on him trying to get that. And the other thing, Justin, that will also throw in the fact that Trump administration has to sue to get the voter rolls. I think there's something there. I don't think that's going to go away. And finally, I haven't heard anyone say, so I'll claim it first. I believe because of the presence of ICE, I believe voter turnout will be down in places like Providence, Pawtucket, and Central Falls, because I believe that is at the heart of a lot of this, of why they don't want to hand over the information. And they were able to justify and say, well, they're here and they're trying to go through the process. There's countless people that overstay their visa and then they try to do it backwards. Then they say, well, I'm doing the paperwork, but they've been here for years and they're hiding in a sanctuary state. But I don't hear, to me, and final note on this, like to them, you can't rule out Dan McKee. He had 11% with the poll in a three-way primary below the speaker's not even running. So you can't rule him out, and 72% disapproval rating, so forth. You can't rule him out. But Aaron Gukian, who ran for lieutenant governor, won Warwick, beat her day of voting, he has no shot in winning. I don't get how McKee, well, you can't rule him out at 11% of the vote, but Aaron, the Republican, has no shot here. So, folks, it's time for Katz's Corner. This is a story that Justin has found. What do you have for us this week, Justin?
Well, I've been keeping an eye on there's a school budget commission through state legislation to look over things in Warwick, they've got a big deficit, try to find some way to make it happen. And one of the things I've been pointing out is if you look we have an October enrollment tool on Anchor Rising where you can see how different school districts are doing with enrollment over the past 26 years. And Warwick is down a lot, and yet their budget hasn't gone down. So there's a lot of questions about what's happening with the budget. But what's interesting recently is the unions are going out, they're going to the meetings, they're sitting there doing all the old tricks. You got to move the meeting. There's too many people, all the childish behavior. And it was curious at the last meeting, one of them got up and said, you have no idea what happens in the classroom, which made me wonder, like, is this how your students behave up there shouting at people at the podium? Is that how your students behave in the classroom? And I encourage people to go out, watch any videos they can see, go to these meetings, because it's shocking to see teachers behaving like this when they've got money on the line. This one who was speaking happens to make over $100,000 a year. That's who's teaching children. They're out there behaving like teenagers at these public meetings, not helping the commissions, not saying, we've got to figure out something about this budget. Here's how we can help. That's just the environment. Valerie Lawson's union and all the other union activists like Pat Crowley have fostered in education. And it's one of the reasons why we're struggling. And it's one of the reasons parents are pulling their kids out of the public schools.
Yeah. And Warwick, to me, Justin, I will read that. And to me, it's like the classic example of an underperforming school district. At one point, they had schools that were 30% occupancy. I remember when the new superintendent who they were fighting, they were talking about how much Warwick schools have declined and far less students than they had. If you go back to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or even back to its dramatic fall off. And yet they still have all these schools, they still have all these teachers, and they still have this huge budget. It doesn't make sense in any way. Folks, you can read that and more at anchorrising.com. He is the managing editor, Justin Katz. Justin, thank you for your patience. Sorry about the minor problem today, but we'll talk to you again.
Great. Thank you, John. I look forward to it.
All right, folks, there it is, our segment, Politics This Week. Folks, the day was running so smoothly. We'll get it back on track, and we will have that posted. This portion of the program is brought to you by Propane Plus. Remember, and you need it for heating, Propane Plus. Call today, 401-885-4209. In Massachusetts, 508-252-3359 for Propane Plus. Residential or commercial, you can depend on Propane Plus. Now, I want to remind people, yes, we are on Facebook, but we're also on X, and we're also on YouTube, and we're also on the radio. So, and then people can watch this on demand as well. Now, I also want to take this opportunity to remind you, because the clock is really ticking here, as far as if you want to get your garage epoxied, the cold weather does come into play, and it's quality asphalt seal coating. Call Corey, free quote, 401-283-9815, 401-283-9815 for quality asphalt seal coating. Now, I want to touch on, there was a very high profile instance over the weekend, and this man in Hopkinton lost his life. And to me, this is another example where I see people commenting about the judges And people are saying, who are these judges and so forth. But I don't hear any coverage or anyone kind of threading the needle that people don't know how many of these people become judges. And I think there should be more of a focus on this. First of all, I have no idea why, but the rest of the media ignored the fact that the driver who ran the 23-year-old girl off of 295 the day before Thanksgiving, he was arrested for that. He was charged for that. So he was arrested again, this time for child porn. Some people were surprised that he was released. We have the story on our website, depetro.com. You see that on the Chiron. But I want to explain, and you also just had this woman that was arrested who ran into that guy, that poor man, 70 years old, walking his dog in Hopkinton, killed him. The dog ran home. And all these violations. What you have to understand, and the same goes for Massachusetts, but where do judges come from? Well, the Rhode Island State House, as we know, is controlled by Democrats. And the Rhode Island State House, especially the Senate right now, is controlled by progressive Democrats. So what do I mean by that? There's a story today of Michael McCaffrey, and they're talking about they'd like to make him a judge, but some people have some reservations. So Val Lawson, who is the progressive leader of the Rhode Island Senate, and let me just be very clear. I want you to be crystal clear with you. She should not be the president of the Rhode Island Senate. It's a conflict of interest. It's a glaring conflict of interest. She's the head of one of the teachers' unions. Because of her, that teacher is allowed to come back in Barrington. Her union, as Justin just mentioned, controls the Warwick schools. According to Justin, there's two teachers' unions, American AFT, American Federation of Teachers, and then NEA Rhode Island. Do you understand? Her priority and loyalty is not to the people that elect her in East Providence. It's all for the union members. It's all for labor. So when people are wondering what's going on with these judges, I agree with you. So many of these individuals let go. They shouldn't be let go. They should be held, or the bail should be higher. But you have to look at it's because they come out of the State House. Who runs the Rhode Island State House? I had someone over the weekend ask me, is Rhode Island still corrupt? Yes, it's embarrassing when you get asked that. But anytime if you travel out of town, you get asked that. And I describe it as it's corrupt in a manner of which people that are part of the process don't even see how corrupt it is. That the people that are shaping it, the laws are crafted by criminal defense attorneys. Much like that Senator Archambault of Lincoln. He had on his website, he can help you out if you get a DUI. He helped write the language for DUI. He's a DUI attorney out of Lincoln. The reason why he crafted language that he knew gave him loopholes that then he could execute in court. You conflict of interest that makes to you, then should they be the person who could then go into a courtroom and manipulate? And they write it in a manner that they know how to make an argument to get around it. It's a major problem. I want to commend, there are some people trying to get involved, but I can't stress enough, unless we straighten out this ballot situation, I don't get any of it. And, Ashley Kalis, who ran for governor in 2022, I think Justin has a higher opinion of her maybe than I do, but I don't hear her mention anything about the ballots. I hear her criticizing the, that right now, the person that I think stands the best chance to be, he's a credible candidate for governor, but you got to focus on what the issue is. There's that great scene in Moneyball when the character Brad Pitt, who's playing Billy Bean, kind of erupts at a scout meeting and says, "You guys aren't even asking the right questions. You're treating it like we're designing jeans for Fabio." And talks about if we perform like the Yankees in here, we're going to lose to them out there. And he says to them in the meeting, Moneyball, "You guys aren't even asking the right questions. You're just going through the motions." And I think that comes into play. I really think that comes into play. Now, folks, I want to remind you two reminders. One, do you need a plumber? I know someone who's a great plumber. The thing about a plumber is many times when you need them is suddenly when, okay, no one wakes up and says, "I think I need a plumber today." And then suddenly you need a plumber today. Call J&B Plumbing today, 401-743-9153. They can repair damaged water pipes. They can repair clogged pipelines, and they can replace water heaters. J&B, 401-743-9153. And if you see all those leaves blowing around your property, first of all, it did get very cold very quickly. I mean, this is just brutal, freezing weather outside. However, who knows? Maybe once this leaves, the rest of the month could be more seasonable. But JD's Lawn Care and Tree Service, they'll do your fall cleanup. 401-441-0154. 401-441-0154. JD Lawn Care. Now, a couple of different updates. Number one, with Central Falls, you still have a murderer on the loose. The mother and I'm talking about the 19-year-old victim who was shot in Central Falls. 19 years old, innocent bystander. I hate the cliche of wrong place at the wrong time, but that is, to me, that does kind of apply. What do I mean by that? There's different times that people are victims of. In Central Falls, they all use, or certain people, they just use the term gun violence. But think of when people are shot. People are shot sometimes in the course of a robbery. Sometimes people are shot in a dispute of some kind of an argument. This wasn't that. This girl, the 19-year-old, she had nothing to do with that. So still no arrest, but I noticed her mother is now posting, "Say her name." And I think that's positive. I think it's positive because as many of you that follow it know, the media moves on. The media does move on. We are in such a fast news cycle. I don't think people realize that because I deal with, for instance, sometimes I'll hear from someone and they'll say, "Now I'm ready to talk to you." And I have to go back and say, "Who is this? Like, why did I want to talk to you?" And then I look and I realize it was something that happened in July. And I reached out and said, "I'd love to give you a platform." And they come back and say, "Now I'm ready to talk." Not to be mean, but the story's moved on. I'm like everyone else. My interest in talking, I'm not going to say who it was, but my interest in talking to that person, there's an expiration date. It was in July. It's not into December. So if you don't talk about something when it happens, I don't like to just throw out cliches, but life moves on. Think what a big story the National Guard shooting was in DC. Think how long ago now that seems. That was the day before Thanksgiving. And there's various things like that. And then they weave their way through the the legal system. But that I know that Central Falls police are working around the clock on that. And then you're still stuck with, I don't see or read, I don't hear, visually see, which would go under read. I don't have any evidence of an elected official saying, if you have information regarding that, you need to come forward. Zero, nothing. And that's always difficult for police. So we're going to stay on that story. Why didn't the rest of the media cover that the guy that Wll Mckee, that ran that 23-year-old girl off of 295? Why didn't they cover that the state police grabbed him? He was arrested on Thursday or Friday, for possession of child porn. I have no idea. They've already, you know what the answer is? They've already moved on. I still think it's egregious that guy is out. And no, I mean, there's nothing. The Central Falls, that is a difficult one, and I know police can't say much, but I just think the basic attitude has to change. And I've also stated I don't hear anyone in the local media talk about how ICE has brought down crime. Not that the illegals are committing all the crime, but it has put them underground. For those of you that watch, now we're not riding out around in this freezing weather. It just doesn't work. But when you have ICE in the headlines, less people go out. They go to work, they come home. They don't call 911. They don't go out. If they don't go out, no one's breaking into their house. If they don't go out, they're not fighting with anyone at a bar or restaurant. The streets are somewhat bare. It has an effect. I think it's going to affect voter turnout. And you still don't hear anybody talk about that. All they want to basically say, this message that the entire state is against President Trump and therefore no one has a chance. I don't think so. All right. I want to thank Justin Katz. If you are listening to the radio, stay tuned for the 2 o'clock news. Everybody stay warm.